Mr. Steve, please.
Thank you very much for the warm introduction, and thank you to the other speakers tonight. It's been very informative and enjoyable. And these conferences remind me of the value of reflection. Coming together and sharing different perspectives are an important part of reflection. And I was reflecting the other day that my grandfather would have turned 110 this week if he was still with us. He passed away a few years ago. But my grandfather, I think, he taught me 3 key life lessons, which I thought I would share tonight in honour of him. The first one was when he was about 17, 18, he left home and became a cane farmer in Australia, a sugar cane farmer. He was cutting the sugar cane manually with his machete and working very hard on the farm. And he realised that that work, which is hard and manual, wasn't going to last forever. So he left that and went to study to become an engineer. And I said, well, what was the thing that he said? Well, you know, change is inevitable. Technology will come, changes will happen. You have to adapt to the changes when they come, or you get left behind in the field cutting sugarcane manually and ultimately left without a job. So his first life lesson for me was that change comes, change happens, and you have to be prepared for it. And you can either benefit from it or lose from it. His second lesson for me as an engineer was that he fought in the Second World War for Australia and did a lot of work working on runways and engineering and going to really hard places in Papua New Guinea where the enemy was going to try and land on the islands, and he would plant bombs to blow up the runways and things in case they did. And I said, Grandfather, why did you do that? He said, because sometimes there's things that are extremely valuable and you have to fight for them to keep them. And I think if you do value something extremely highly, then you do put protection and careful measures in it and you work hard for them. The third life lesson he taught related to women, and I won't share that one tonight, but it's definitely entertaining, and if you get me some other night after a few drinks, I'll share those life lessons with you on the third point from my grandfather. But he was definitely much more successful than I was in that field and endeavour. But I do want to pick up those first 2 points. Yes, there is a lot of changes in the student space, but there always has been. Students and visas, every immigration minister I've met with ever has wanted to tinker with the visa system. There is no country in the world where the immigration minister does not tinker with the visa system at some point to adjust some point. Every country that I've met, every immigration minister I've met will tinker with the visa system at some point. So yes, change is inevitable. And if you value something, you fight for it. And I think that's what we're seeing by the Australian government fighting to preserve the integrity of the student visa sector. The government has very good measures in place to try and protect what we've built over decades of trying to preserve not only the reputation, but the quality of the education sector. So I thought tonight I would touch on some of the integrity measures just to give you a sense of why they are there and the importance of what they're doing, and things beyond just the sort of the change measures to the visa processes that have been announced. So more than 3.5 million international students have lived and studied in Australia since 2001. For a population of 27 million people, we've invited 3.5 million international students to come and study and live in Australia. I think that's a fairly phenomenal number to wrap your mind around in terms of a stat. 3.5 million since 2001. And we want to preserve a world-class education system that supports a sustainable growth. Matt touched on that, the other speakers have touched on it, that we want to see sustainable growth with high quality and integrity. The Australian international education sector is a national asset. It contributes to a peaceful, prosperous and resilient region and advances Australia's global interests. It has been integral to building enduring relationships and economic prosperity within the region and in the more broadly the world. But we want to ensure that our students are receiving a high quality education, and we want to avoid some of what was reported in the Nixon review. So I've met with students that have been, through my work in Australia in the multicultural sector, I've met with students that were ripped off with dodgy providers. I've met students that were living in very low quality education accommodation, and that resulted in some tragedies. And if you want to study those, look at the Migration System Final Report, the Rapid Review of the Exploitation of Australia's Visa System, or the Nixon Review, and the Joint Commanding in Foreign Affairs and Defence. There is evidence on the table that there were problems inside the system, and they needed to be addressed, and we are addressing them. So some of the integrity measures that I wanted to highlight that go beyond the visa changes really go to our investment in other areas. And Australia, the government has made an investment of $33.3 million over 3 years into the Australian Skills Quality Authority, which continues to proactively engage with the registered higher education providers about the integrity we see in our system. So the government is putting money on the table to seriously look at those particular integrity measures. And it's responding by focusing regulatory action on providers where there are known risks relating to those practices, and monitoring of certain providers to collect information and intelligence to ensure that the providers onshore are holding up their obligations. Regulatory action includes focuses on the provider's obligations related to student protections, students' attendance, marketing and recruitment practices, and the fit and proper test requirements as a response to the recommendations of the review. AAERI is also undertaking unannounced and short notice site visits for large cohorts of providers whose registration is currently due for renewal. Since 1 January 23, regulatory action has been taken against 30 cost providers. Outcomes include 29 decisions to cancel registration, 6 decisions to suspend registration, 1 to impose a condition, and 1 written direction. As of March 2024, AAERI has compliance assessments underway in relation to a further 66 providers, including issues relating to the fitness and propriety of individuals to own or control a higher education provider, and a range of other matters relating to the quality and integrity of international education. So the Australian government is taking action on dodgy providers onshore, and we are, as I've outlined earlier in my other presentation, looking at changes in the Visa Act to make sure that we are getting the genuine students. On our side, processing times often get raised as an issue, and I want to say that we are working hard on our processing times, and during the last month, we did bring our processing times down in June to try and help things. But we do rely on the quality of the applications on what are submitted by your providers. We've talked today about how you might be able to work concurrently using IMI account to lodge, get the agents to get the material ready, so there's not a gap between when a university issues a qualification and the time it takes to lodge a visa. Give us our time, we will deliver fair and open decisions. We are very keen to ensure that we continue to keep engagement high. We continue to do engagement sessions with the sector about the changes that are coming. We don't want to hide away from the fact that the changes that we've introduced have been difficult. They have been, but we've been trying to be transparent about them as much as we can. We are hoping that these changes are now being understood by the sector after a year of significant change, and people will be able to understand what's required in the system better as well. But I'll just finish my remarks by just pointing out a few other things about when you think about Australia and India. Most people don't know this, but more than 400,000 people travelled between India and Australia last year on various visas to cross our border. That's a significant number of people that come across. We also have more than 1 million diaspora community living in Australia, which is a significant proportion of our population of 27 million, when more than 1 million come from an Indian origin. So the ties between our countries are significant and strong from a migration perspective. And in the last year, more than 100,000 people got a skilled visa, either permanent or temporary skills/employment visa, to come to our country. The education sector is an important asset in its own right, but it is contributing to both population growth, the skilling of Australia, and our long-term economic prosperity. So I wanted to not only demonstrate that we value the student sector by investing in the integrity of it, I wanted to highlight that we really celebrate how the student sector is helping grow Australia's economy, its economic interests, and its long-term skill-based. I thank AAERI very much for the opportunity to talk tonight, to share some reflections on my grandfather's life lessons, but I will revert, I will keep the third lesson for another day. I really hope that the information we're sharing tonight is helpful for you as an industry grow. Thank you very much.